So they started making progress on the wall. I mean, things were really clicking along for them. They had so many people on board, and things were just coming together very handily. And everything was going good until these two guys showed up, Sanballat and Tobiah. And I tell you, seems like there's always a Sanballat and a Tobiah. People that for whatever reason, they got it in their head that you getting out of the wilderness is something that they just can't abide by, and they need to oppose you. It's not uncommon for people trying to get out of wilderness to deal with people like Sanballats and Tobiahs. I'll be honest, I don't understand it. That's something I've never understood. You would think they would be happy for them. Like, hey, I'm happy that you're getting out of this. Or if they're not happy for them, at least they could just leave them alone. But that wasn't what happened. That's often something that just doesn't happen. Sanballats and Tobiah show up. Nehemiah and Israel, after all those years of desolation, were finally putting some things together. I would hope that Sanballat and Tobiah could have been happy for them, or at least just let them be. It says that Sanballat got really angry, and Tobiah, he started piling on the insults. And the two of them combined their forces together, and they began to rile people up against them. They actually got an entire group of people, an entire army of people they had plotted they were going to come and fight against Jerusalem. As if the wilderness hadn't been enough for them, right? Now they have to try to get out of it while being opposed by an entire army of people. And this is actually the first time in the story that you see the workers begin to get weary. Chapter 4, verse 10 says, the strength of the laborers was giving out. And the workers started saying for the first time, there's just so much rubble, we can't rebuild this wall. What a shift that was, huh? They went from, man, look at all the progress we're making, to, I'm just so tired and there's just no way we could get all this done. And Sanballats and Tobias can have that effect on us, can't they? They have this ability to take people to go from seeing possibility and faith in God and getting more done than we ever thought we could and laboring with a great heart. Sanballats and Tobiah can take people from that and just get them to the place where the people just say, I'm just so tired. Or there's just so much to be done. There's no way we can get it all done. There are a few things, I think, more difficult to deal with. Maybe this is just me, but I think for a lot of us, there are a few things more difficult to deal with in the wilderness than people who should be for us, who are actually standing against us. And it says that the people of Israel, the people working with Nehemiah, they got weary and they got afraid. But they didn't stay weary and afraid. I think that's cool. Nehemiah brought them back to reality that was greater than the reality of being oppressed. So when this first started happening, it said what Nehemiah did was they posted a guard and they prayed. And as they prayed, Nehemiah got this message, and he gave this message to the people. And what he said to them was just simply, guys, don't be afraid of them. Remember the Lord. And I think that's important for us to see in the wilderness. We are not, when we get to hope in the wilderness, which you can get to hope in the wilderness, we are not hopeful in the wilderness because we found some secret of maintaining energy and motivation. Nehemiah never said to them, remember your motivational talks. Right? We're not hopeful in the wilderness because we perceive the pile of rubble to be manageable. Nehemiah didn't say, you guys are being so dramatic, the pile of rubble isn't that big. No, he says to them, remember the Lord. That was his message to them. Remember the Lord. And as you're remembering the Lord, what you remember, that if God is for us, who could ever be against us? Right? And this is like one of the provisions that God has for us in the wilderness, is that his provision is himself. And we have in our God a God who will stand for us. And if God is for us, who could ever be against us? Well, after Nehemiah gives this message to the people, Sanballat and Tobiah doubled down on their opposition. They really poured it on. They poured it on heavy, trying to get him out. They tried tricking Nehemiah into leaving his work. They spread lies about him, the kind of lies that if people believed it could get Nehemiah killed. They sent people to Nehemiah pretending to be prophets from God who had this message from God, like pretending they were on Nehemiah's side. They literally hired people to go and intimidate Nehemiah. Sanballat and Tobiah made things so much harder than they needed to be. Nehemiah had to take 50% of his workforce and take him off of work and put him as on guard duty. The workers weren't allowed to go home. They had to stay in case there was an attack, and everyone that was working had to carry a weapon with them all day long. The people still faced opposition as they were seeking to get out of their wilderness. But despite it all, in chapter 6, verse 15, we read, "So the wall was completed in 52 days." And that is good to hear as we seek to get out of our wildernesses. We may well be opposed from people as we're trying to get out. I wish they wouldn't, but they do. They threaten us. They lie about us. They try to intimidate us. They rally people against us and things like that. But in the words of Nehemiah, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Just remember the Lord. All right? And one of the provisions that God gives to us is the gift of we don't need to be afraid. We don't need to be afraid. We can keep doing the work that we need to do to get out of this wilderness. There came a point when Sanballat sent a message to Nehemiah, and it's like, hey, why don't you just come on over and meet with me and we can work all this out? And Nehemiah just sent a message back, and he said, why would I leave this important work that God has given me to do to deal with the likes of you? In the midst of it all, Nehemiah remembered the Lord. He was not deterred. He was not afraid. Oh, sure, it got exhausting and hard. I'm sure there were moments when Nehemiah was very frustrated with everything Sanballat and Tobiah were doing. But he didn't put his eyes on Sanballat or Tobiah. He didn't put his eyes on the opposition. He kept his eyes on the Lord, and in so doing, he remained unafraid. And the wall was finished in 52 days. So here's my question to you. When was a time you were trying to get out of your wilderness when other people tried to oppose you or other people made it more difficult for you to make it out? And the follow-up to that is, how did God see you through?